Yeah, and a huge part of training and success in training is about accepting that there will be challenging sessions.
Right.
What you have to develop as an athlete is not this motivation that can be conjured up on a snap, but what you have to develop is a set of tools in your head to how are you going to tackle these challenges. And the thing is, there is a recipe for that. There is a snap, there is a trigger word that you can say. For me, it's usually just breathe. It's cadence. Let's have fun with it. Those three kind of triggers just enables me to tackle the most challenging of sessions, and
Right.
even sessions off the bike,
Yeah.
life stuff. I knew what was going on, what I was demanding of my body, or the stimulus that I was trying to apply to my body. But it was that self-belief thing. It was like the workouts became, I built up the workouts to something bigger than they were.
Right.
And that happens when you try something for the first time.
Yeah.
You have to develop the skill set to be able to go to battle with those workouts.
Right.
And in some sense, it's got to get to a place where you're not going to battle. You're just working with the workouts.
Yeah.
You're like buddies who are trying to get to the same end goal.
Right.
And so I needed to put myself through that, because unless you introduce yourself to that new stimulus, you're not going to be able to develop the skill set to tackle it. People have this idea that life is about being happy and being at this high level of just being, being successful the entire time. But life is about being able to surf the highs and lows. It's the ones who are able to, just walk past the highs and not get too caught up in it and get addicted to that. And the ones who are able to walk with the same aplomb past the lows and come away with takeaways and realize that this is just part of the journey. Those are the ones who ultimately end up kind of lasting longer in the sport, and the ones who kind of fizzle out or sell their bike after something happens or something they expected to happen didn't happen. That's the difference. So yeah, for me it's like I've been through enough of this. I've been through highs and lows enough to know that the highs and lows are what the definition of life is.
Yeah.
It's not high.
I am Baiki Venki, and this is the Working Athlete Podcast. Here, I talk to working athletes from all walks of life and experts from various sports to provide you with inspiration, training tips, time management, and lifestyle advice. If this is something that interests you, please make sure you subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss any future episodes. Anyone who is vaguely familiar with cycling in India knows Naveen John. He is the current and 6-time national champion in individual time trial. It is his 4th appearance on this podcast. So we have some catching up to do to keep up with the number of his national titles. As with the earlier 3 episodes, he shares some fantastic insights in this one as well. In this episode, we talked about what went right and what did not go as planned with his performances in road as well as the track nationals that just completed last week. We also talk about how to do off-season and season planning right. Without much further ado, let us get into my conversation with Naveen John. Welcome to the Working Athlete Podcast, NJ.
Thank you. Good to be back.
Edition number 4. So, NJ, let's. So I'm thinking this podcast will talk about the road nationals, the track nationals that just completed, and now you're in off season.
Yes.
What are the things that you would do in off season, and also planning ahead and all that? So let us start with the Nats.
Yeah, I mean, we are in the end of December, and a month ago, I guess, was Road Nationals. Feels like ages ago. 2021 has been a crazy year because it's the first. I mean, we've had 3 sets of nationals this year. Feb, March, we had MTB Road and Track, which were 2020 nationals that we had at the beginning of 2021. And then, 6 months later, we had another set of nationals, October end, November end, December end, MTB Road and Track. And I am probably one of the, me and a couple other track athletes, about 3 other track athletes, are probably the only ones who've attempted to perform at a top level at four sets of national, four nationals. Road track, right? And these are guys who are actually like gunning for the top, right? And yeah, so it's been a really challenging year because of that. You kind of don't complain about it though, because you learn to you learn to take these things with a little bit of appreciation, because 2 years ago we didn't have anything in terms of competition, so you can only look at it and say, hey man, this is fantastic, this is awesome. So no complaints. It's just that it's been a long year. It feels like a long year. Imagine spending on one national, so financially 4x, travel 4x, just mentally preparing yourself to put yourself through like that suffering that's required on race day, 4x. But yeah, no complaints per se. So road nats, a month ago feels like ages ago, but to recap it, managed to win my sixth individual time trial title. I really don't count, and really when I go into it, I don't think about what number I'm on. When I leave it, the only reason I count the number is because people ask, like, which one is this, and you have to say number 6 or number 7. So yeah, for me, it's again, like I said, winning that road nationals is just a confirmation for me that things are going well, and I'm still in the game. This year was the biggest, one of the biggest gaps I had to second place. So on par with, my previous nats. But for me personally, it was hugely satisfying because it was the first day or the first time that I've competed in a nationals where my peak performance in terms of numbers and speed and everything was on race day and not in some training day or mock TT or no OMR.
That is really good.
So that was really, for me, that was huge. And seeing the biggest numbers I put out in a time trial, the highest average speed that I've done in a time trial. And in some sense, this TT, because of the support that I had, particularly from two people. One, my coach, who kind of, came up with a plan. And then Anish, a close friend of mine, who...
the support crew.
Support crew, yeah. One-man support crew. I mean, this was his second road national, so we learned a lot from Panvel with the mistakes we made there. And after the individual time trial, Anish and I just looked at each other and we were like, wait, that was nationals? It was so easy. And it was such a high-level performance and such a high-level execution that it was no short than, like a pro team executing a time trial in a stage race. It's just like
because you guys have been going over that.
That's it.
We've again and again.
Exactly. We've done mock time trials in cold weather, in rain, crazy traffic, and so doing it in this clinical environment of nationals made it feel so easy. At the end, we were just like, wait, this was it. This is what we slogged so much for in the 4 weeks leading up to it. And we're like, yeah, I guess so. And then the road race was just a little bit of, just a little bit of fun. Try to race it sensibly and, maybe set it up for someone else. To be honest, on that day, I didn't have the kind of fitness that would be required to kind of ride away from the field because the competition, basically the strongest guys there were the services. So kudos to them. They didn't have just one or two strong riders. They had 6 strong riders.
Wow.
Any one of them could have, won nationals that day. And so the kid who ended up winning, Sahil, was the strongest all-round rider at nationals. In fact, he won the overall best male rider at the race. So deserving winner of the road race. Of course, we'll probably never hear about him next year because for those boys, it's just one and done. That's the motivation.
Yeah.
But that was good. And so I was just happy to finish the road race. And really, by the time the TT was over, I was just thinking about track nationals at that point. So, yeah.
So talking, expanding a little more on that, right? So coming to the TT performance. Yeah. So what are the things that were slightly different from the your previous, in
Yeah.
terms of planning and execution?
Yeah. So the big thing, like I said, was it was the role of those two people, my coach, and then Anish, my support crew, and then I think the third most important was me and the execution and how I went about it. So as far as the coaching side of things and the training side of things, this nationals was the most, and it just goes back to this point that there's more than one way to skin a cat. This nationals build was ITT build was unique from every other 9 nationals builds that I've done for the TT. In the sense, Nandi was closed.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things that forms the crux of my riding, because it's my sole ride. I do this little bit of just climbing vertical for aerobic fitness. I didn't have that. And then I do one of the sessions that I felt was most important to me being race ready, which was these TT bike efforts on the shallow part of Nandi in the TT position to develop that position endurance.
First 4K.
That first 4K. Yeah, exactly. 10-minute effort approximately in the TT position and the power that I used to generate on that usually used to be the power that I would end up on race day,
Right.
And so these two important sessions to me were just wiped off, and I was like, whoa, okay, so I have no clue how to approach this TT anymore in terms of training stimulus, The one thing that I still kept in the plan was the practice time trials, because that more than physical, it's just that mental thing, because I like those time trials not because in the past I used to look at them as opportunities to get positive sensations, to kind of register a high average speed or a particularly good power. But what I realized that it really delivers is every weekend on the OMR is a different experience. Wind conditions change, traffic conditions change, the roadblocks, where they are and how busy they are change. Fog, all of that. So what I learned that
there was rain also this time.
There was rain this time that we had to
like
deal with.
3-4 weeks continuous rain.
Long monsoons this time in Bangalore. And so what I really get from that session is I get unique challenges that randomly pop up on the day, and I have to deal with it. And so it develops like this resilience that's required to perform at this top level, because if you can deal with like 3 variables every practice time trial and still finish the time trial, and I do these time trials when I'm tired, when I'm after a gym day, so I really try to pile on the list of challenges and then negotiating that. And despite all of the shittiness, can we get to the finish line and check off 40 kilometers? So that session is the one session that I kept, and that's the one thing that I told my coach, hey, I need this for my mental readiness, right? So I can be like super resilient on the start line. And then the rest of it was just a completely different stimulus, and I was just completely and blindly trusted my coach. At one point, we sat down. Beginning of October is when I started the 8-week build to Nats. And Ashton put up the 8 weeks to Nats. And I looked at it and I was like, holy crap, this is nothing like I've ever done before, right? And it was a lot of Zwift racing, a lot of Zwift racing workouts, which is kind of a cool hidden structured workout on Zwift that is very, very challenging. And then a lot of strength training as always. And then quite a bit of a little bit of anaerobic work, because that's a weakness of mine. And if you don't have to focus on your weaknesses, but you just do have to kind of walk past and do the job that's necessary to plug those holes. And so the Zwifting part, I'd spent almost 50% to 60% of my time training to this nationals on Zwift.
Which was very different from what?
Completely different. I mean, like last time I would do my recovery rides on Zwift. Now it's like the hardest days were on Zwift, right? And the power was, because whenever you're on indoors on a trainer, your power is always going to be a little lower. It's challenging to do, efforts in a tucked TT position. But so much so that I doubted the process, so much so that, about 2 weeks into the plan, I just randomly dropped Ash a message. I'm like, hey, are we sure this is gonna work? And and yeah, I mean, his response was pretty simple. I mean, it was like, yeah, just race hard in
Yeah.
Zwift races, because it's Zwift races are challenging because it's easy to finish in a Zwift race, or it's easy to do a 1 hour Zwift workout, but in the last 5 to 10 minutes of a Zwift workout or a Zwift race, you really have to have a deep motivation to want to win there or perform there in this virtual world,
Right.
or you have to have something in the real world that really motivates your actions in the virtual Zwift world. And so when I had that conversation, he told me kind of a simple thing. He looked at my Zwift races and my Zwift workouts, and the intensity factors IF on those sessions were about 0.95, which is like 95% of my set FTP.
Right.
Of course, not taking into account that indoors my
Indoors
FTP
is
is lower, would be
lower.
lower. But he was like, dude, you should be doing 1.05s. And I'm like, whoa, okay. So after that call, I did like this race, and I was like, you know what? Screw the result. I know how to get because a large part of training and really getting the most out of workouts is, okay, you see what's on paper, maybe it's a 5x5 or a 5x8 or a 6x10 or a 2x20 or whatever, right? At different zones. But really you have to ask yourself, okay, you see the title or the main set description. You see which zone you need to be working in. But really, what is the intent of that workout? Right?
Yeah.
What are we trying to achieve with this workout? Right? And when he told me, you know what, 0.95 for these workouts are not is not the intent of this session. It's not to be in your comfort zone and just kind of finish it, and play it safe.
Right.
The intent of these workouts is to get time above your threshold, for 40 minutes or whatever, right? For just around that TT duration.
Right.
And so all of a sudden I looked at the race differently. It wasn't like, oh, how can I conserve to sit in the bunch to be able to possibly have some legs at the finish, right? And it's not easy to win a Zwift race in the ACAT, the Open ACAT. And I picked really competitive races where you have the best on Zwift race.
Right.
Lionel Voyasin, he's like this big Zwifter and stuff like that. So these really top guys, like pros.
Right.
And it's easy to get to the last 10 minutes with these guys, but these guys will drop you in the end,
Yeah.
right? So instead, what I did was, after that call with him, where he was like, the intent of this workout is to get a hard day in.
Right. Yeah.
And so what I did was, I would not attack from the gun, be smart about it, start hard, really stay in the front of the bunch. And then what I would do is, when you're riding against the top Zwifters in the world, they will drop you on the climbs because they're going 6.2 watts per kilo, and the best I can do is about 5.5.
Yeah.
So I'll go full gas up the climb, and I would get dropped. So I would pick a hilly course. But then what I would do is, I would be caught in no man's land, because you have the best Zwifters up front in a group of, say, 12 out of 60 riders. I am at 5.5. I'm like, an average A grader, right? And so I would be caught in the middle. And then there's like a lot of people who have the rest of the field, 40 guys.
Correct.
So what I made my challenge was, okay, I'm caught in no man's land. And it's very demotivating on Zwift when you're in no man's land. You either pull out or you fall back to the group on the road. Instead, what I did was, I kind of rode a really attacking time trial. Think of, I visualized kind of, Roglic on a break in the Tour with Bernal, or like, in the Vuelta with Bernal, or like Pogacar attacking by himself, where I'm just like, or Alaphilippe in the last 10Ks of World Champs, where I just attacked every climb. And then instead of going under tempo, I just sat at threshold on the flat, so I wasn't fully recovering. And at the end of the race, I got that 1.5 intensity factor.
Right.
And I was like top 15 or whatever, but I was in this no man's land. My goal was not to let anyone from the back catch me.
Right.
And at the same time, the gap to the front is always increasing.
Increasing.
Because those guys are fast. So it was this intent that my coach shared with me about the workout, which changed the way I approached it. And if I hadn't had that conversation, I would have just been getting 0.95 intensity workouts, and I probably would have had an average day at Nats. I
Right.
would have probably still won, but
Yeah.
it wouldn't have been that special day that I had
Yeah.
on that day.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. That is that is fascinating, right?
Yeah.
Once you have that conversation, you had that doubt,
Yeah.
is it really going to
Yeah.
work?
Yeah.
I had that conversation, and then he came back with that.
And it's interesting because you have to, when you're with a coach, working with a coach, there is an interpersonal relationship there. There's a dynamic there. And you want to, as an athlete, you have the onus, if you want that relationship to succeed and produce results, you have to maintain in some sense, the health of that relationship. And so how you ask questions are important. So I had to pose a question in a way where I didn't show that I was doubting the process, but perhaps I was lacking that intent. What are we doing here exactly, right? And then the coach comes back at you, and a good coach won't feel threatened by questions and inquisitiveness. In fact, they would answer it in a way that actually gives the athlete that furthers the athlete's trust in that particular
that
paradigm.
confidence. Yeah.
Exactly. That's what's important. And so it's those small things that are important. But that conversation kind of changed the flavor of how I approach those Zwift sessions. And I just kind of attack them, versus kind of just being kind of just getting them checked off, and
that was the one angle of it, the training and coaching perspective, and then the support perspective and the execution perspective.
So the support perspective, I mean, Anish was part of my crew also in the March Road Nationals, and there we made some mistakes. I mean, and we recognized it very quickly. We talked about it immediately the day of, that was Anish's first Road Nationals, and he was on my support moto. And he made this small error in judgment, which anyone would have made. Even I have made when I've sat in the moto supporting a couple of my athletes, which is you break this bubble of the athlete's performance bubble, So when you're performing in a race, you really... I really believe you have to be, you're in the zone, right? And if you're an athlete who's targeting at performing and producing a result, you've done all the thinking and the preparation beforehand. And nothing on the day is going to actually elevate your performance on that day. The job's done. As much as people like to think that there's some magical thing that you can do on race day that'll affect the outcome, it's usually all done before. It's already been done in practice. You already pre-thought about everything that you're going to think about, the negative places your mind's going to go and how you're going to get out of those places or not even step into those places. All of this has been done. So at Panvel Nationals, there's a small error in judgment where kind of there was an interaction between him and me, like where Anish was just cheering me on, it's like, you got this. Or like the moto just came into my field of view, and then also there was a communication issue with the official, with the lane.
There is that lane change.
And so he was trying to communicate the lane information to me, but he didn't have the experience of how to communicate it. Like instead of, it wasn't clear. It was like stay left, stay right. There was confusing signals. So all of that led to a lot of friction during the effort. And right after the effort, we didn't talk. We just said, let's just wait for the result, and then let's have a conversation about what went wrong. Right. But when we heard we won, we just had a freaking huge laugh about it. We were like, let's not let that happen again. But a huge part of it is my responsibility, because as an athlete, you need to know your course, no matter what. And part of it was Anish's responsibility, which he also took on, which was like, on race day, I don't need to do anything to mentally lift up Naveen's performance, right? Or physically. He's going to do his job. I just need... So everyone
take
does
care
their
of the
job.
safety and what
everyone
all
does
that.
their job, right? And so in this Nats, literally Anish was there doing stuff that needed to be done before I even asked. Like I would pick up the pump and Anish was there just holding the bike, and I was pumping. Like we didn't even have to say anything, I like looked at my skin suit, and Anish was like ready to help me. Like he would just stand back, and I would just put on my skin suit, and I need a little help to put my arms in. He would just be there, like just lift up the skin suit, done. You know. So it's like this. It's just I mean, race day is just a choreography. You know, it's the same things. It's a dance, and both the support crew and the athlete needs to know the steps of that dance, and they need to step in and step out when it matters, and and they need to step back when it doesn't, right? And then nothing needs to be said, nothing more needs to be done. It's and that's what really worked the second time we did it, you know? So yeah, and now Anish is like pro.
He is awesome, and the execution itself,
the execution was flawless. I mean, I stuck to my plan. I knew in the first 3 to 4 minutes of a time trial, the key is not thinking about winning or not thinking about your goal power. It's just about relaxing, not using a power meter to not go too hard, you know. And after those and in those first 4 minutes of a time trial, you know, first 4 minutes of like a 48-minute effort, you just have to realize that, yeah, you're going to feel a little disoriented, but you know what's coming. There's pain coming. There's speed coming. There's hurt coming. There's big power numbers coming. But in those first 4 minutes, you don't think about that. You just kind of get your head ready.
Keep it in that zone.
Keep it in that zone, and really keep your gun in the holster. You know, don't like start, you know, shooting bullets in those first 4 minutes. And then everything just starts to. It's like the story's already written. You know? You're just reading it off the pages of a book that's already written. So
yeah, that's beautiful. No, when you have gone through that process over and over again, and then when on the day it is kind of going as planned and as it is like you, the script is already written and you're
just reading all it.
That's very nicely put. So then coming to the road nats, the road race. So how was it any different from the previous few races, and how was it
in the level of the field? Like the 2020 nationals happened in March. There were only about 10 strong guys in the field out of 75. This Nats, there were a lot more stronger guys. Like the level in general was higher. And this was the largest starting field at nationals in the road race. 120 people on paper.
Wow.
That's huge. And so the level of everyone was higher, and there were about 25 guys who could have won. About 20 guys who could have won on the day. You know,
that's huge.
Or been on the podium. There's only about 10, 12 guys who could have won because they have that finishing kick. But it's about 20, 25 guys who could have easily been on the podium, you know. There were only a few guys out there who were really, I mean, the services guys are the ones who really believed they could win. And ultimately that showed in the way they were racing. They had 3 guys who were just on my tail. And last year, after about 60 Ks, everyone had run out of bullets. But this time, the services boys were just, I mean, they were AK-47s. They were just like, you know, it was and after about that 60K of racing was where I realized, the services are going to keep doing this attacking style of racing. And I'm going to keep chasing it down. So after that 60K point, I was like, you know what? I'm done chasing. Now it's time for someone else who really wants it to kind of play their hand. And if I see a situation where I can help a winning break stay away from the field, then I would kind of bridge up to it. But nobody was willing to make that effort. Everyone had the legs to sit in the bunch and to sit on the front of the bunch, but nobody had the legs to separate from the bunch. You know, not a group of guys at least. If 1 or 2 guys go, there's no point. But it has to be like 4, 5 guys, strong guys who all have that working ability. And then if I saw that, there was a chance for me to say, okay, let me bridge up to that and help that break stay away. Hopefully with a couple of watt bombs athletes in it, otherwise there's no point. And that never materialized because quite a few of the watt bombers this year, they were at a level where, they didn't have that level where they could stay away from a field like this. They were strong. They were stronger than they were last year, but there were a lot more guys who were also strong.
Right.
So they weren't like differently strong or a
Yeah.
different level.
That's the beauty of racing, right? It's not just about what work you are doing and what level you are, but
what levels
everyone else
brings,
is.
yeah. And it's only going to go up. And in the absence of there being a challenging course, it's never going to be a challenging course at nationals. Like if there was a hill of anything around 4 minutes, then there's no chance.
Everything changes.
Right? There's only 3 athletes or 4 athletes who can stay and create a separation on that kind of an effort, but in the absence of that, it's one of those situations where all I can do as an athlete is hope that I get to work with a really strong sprinter, and then it becomes fun. But still, I'm missing that sprinter in the Watt Bombs roster.
Right.
I have 1 or 2 next year, but let's see how it plays out. Former national champions. I'm working with a couple of guys who won in sprints, but the level's going up, so it's only going to be more challenging.
It is interesting, and also there seems to be some level of concerted, coordinated chases and stuff like that.
Like the only so there was a break in the middle of the race. It was as soon as I sat up after the first 60 Ks, the next attack ended up being the break, and no one chased it, right? Because I wasn't chasing it, so no one else was in chase mode. And so that break settled, and at that point I was like, I'm thinking about track nationals at this point,
right? And
Shri and a couple of, basically a whole bunch of Watt bombers, Shri, Makarand, Joel from Tamil Nadu, and Sudarshan from Maharashtra,
right?
So this community racing boys kind of came to the front, and they mounted a good solid chase. They chased for about, again, not the inexperience showed a little bit because the pace of the chase was not fast enough. It was taking too long to bring a weak group like that back.
But they eventually got it back.
But they eventually got it within about 30 seconds. And the big mistake they made was that 30 seconds is where the race is made or broken. And I knew if these boys sit on the front, that 30-second gap would have lasted till the finish. And so I was like, once I saw the 30-second gap, because that's the hard part to close, because the guys up front know that the guys are in the back. So there's that motivation now to go harder.
Right.
And so that's where I was like, if I don't close this, these boys are going to be riding for the next 20K on the front. So that I kind of punched it, closed it, neutralized the race at that point. Everything came back together. And then, it was the only really good attack that came was Shivain. Shivain made a really good attack in the last 10-15 Ks of the race. And then the same crew of boys who were chasing kind of started going to the front again. It's you have to think, okay, if you're chasing, why are you chasing, right? Are you chasing to set it up for a teammate, but no one has really had that ability to bridge up or win a sprint? Or and in a situation where Shivain is off the front, you don't need to chase. The service is in the race to chase,
because you're just bringing down one.
You're just bringing down one of your own guys in some sense, and that will. People will figure out stuff, and everyone has their own motivations, right? So road racing is interesting for that reason. And road racing, you can't be too fussed about the result. There is a huge amount of luck involved there. On non-selective courses, huge amount of luck. It's just it's you can't take it to heart. A good result also doesn't mean it's a result that you can repeat the next year.
Right.
It's just like, take it for what it is, move on to the next.
A lot of dynamics at play.
A lot.
Super. Let's now jump into the track nationals.
So that was a challenging one. After I finished road nats, I knew track nats was on the schedule, and it was 3 weeks away. And I took 2 days off. One day, one of them was not really an off day, it was a travel day. And third day, I was back on the bike, easy spin, gym, into the anaerobic efforts. So with the track block, I had the plan laid out for me. Ashton laid out the plan a week before I headed out to Road Nats. You know, what a funny anecdote is like, so he'd uploaded the plan and there were a couple notes on the sessions and they were like, okay, for the 3 minute efforts, it was like, start at 510 watts. And I was like, man, I've never done 510 watts for 3 minutes. You know, I'm like, where are these numbers coming? Is Ashton really expecting this much of me? And I was like, and I messaged him. It's like, only one question. Everything looks good, and I'd followed his build up to breaking four and also his world champs. And I knew what kind of training he was doing. He was doing this middle distance running program, which is basically a lot of anaerobic length efforts with playing around with work to rest ratios, 1:1 or 2:1 work to rest ratios. And it was back-to-back days of anaerobic. So it was anaerobic in the morning, anaerobic in the evening, gym in the morning, anaerobic in the evening, anaerobic the next day,
My
anaerobic the day after
God.
that. It was anaerobic, and then the rest day was VO2 work, 5 by 5,
Oh,
and there were no rest days in between. And then the easy day, so the maintenance day was VO2 work, and the easy day was threshold work, right?
jeez.
So basically, what happens in track racing is, okay, you're all of a sudden just shifting what hard and medium and easy and everything is.
Right. Yeah.
Threshold becomes, in time trial training, threshold becomes VO2 training in track. Speed work goes from VO2 to anaerobic. Sprints go from, like 15 second efforts to like 30-second efforts.
Yeah.
So it's like there's this big just shift in terms that are used,
Right.
And I recognized the pattern. I was like, I'm pretty sure this is the exact same build Ashton used to break the 4 minute barrier.
Right.
I'm like, oh, brilliant. He has the confidence that like this
You
guy,
can pull it
some
off.
dude can pull it off, right?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure he wouldn't have thrown it on anyone.
Yeah.
But he put it on my calendar. I was like, I know what's going on here. And I was like, how hard can this be, I did the first day, did the second day, did the third day. I'm like, at that point, I stopped for a second. I was like, nobody in cycling actually knows what Ashton did when he broke that 4 minute barrier. This work is just the hardest work that you can possibly do in cycling.
Right.
And in those first 3 days, I realized that, people say, okay, from a standing start, 62 kph for 4 minutes, right? Most of us don't touch that on a downhill.
Right.
Okay, 480 watts, for 5 minutes with 1000 watt first lap or 800 watt first lap. Okay, you kind of get that, and maybe you can do that for one lap or something, right? But to kind of do this build for 8 weeks, right? I was doing it for 3, and 3 days in, I was just like, I stopped and I was like, I had a brand new level of appreciation for the work. I mean, it's always the work that's hard. The results just like a confirmation of the work, right?
Right.
So it's the work that's the actual challenge. And of course, performing on race day mentally requires quite a bit of a different level of human, right? To be able to trust that work, to quiet the doubts and just focus on the process, right? But it gave me an appreciation for the work that was involved, that he had to put in. And I can confidently say that even Ghana wasn't putting himself through that kind of stuff.
Right. Yeah.
In fact, no athlete in cycling has had to have put themselves through that kind of training. And I saw it after 3 days.
Yeah.
And I was like, shit, I have 2 more weeks of this.
Yeah.
And so I had to really come up with this approach of, I had to just turn off my emotions. I had to turn off my negative sensations I had to turn off my doubts about whether I'd be able to hit numbers. And I just had to wake up every morning, go out, do the effort. Even if it was 30 watts short, I had to be happy with it, because all I can give is my max. Right. And I did that. And so week after nationals was when I realized actually what was in front of me. The week after nationals, I somehow managed to finish off that week, got all the TSS on the plan, got all the time in zone, probably about 5-10 watts under targets on some days. And just with that it was challenging because of that. It was just like you just had to wake up,
Mm.
do the session, eat, carb up, take a nap, and not too long, because if you work too long, then your second session is affected.
Mm.
So like 45-minute naps, no more than that. Wake up, 2-3 coffees, do a little bit of coaching work to distract the mind. Just go out. Don't look. For the first time in my life, I didn't look at what session was on the next day. I turned on my Wahoo. It's like, oh, 3-minute efforts at 420 watts. Okay, let's go. And yeah. What happened then was so I had that was my toughest week of training all year. Close to 1,000 TSS. And these are all with short rides, 1.5 hour rides to get to 1,000 TSS.
Jesus.
The intensity is ridiculous,
Yeah.
right? And I got to the end of this week.
Not these 6 hour
No,
rides.
6 hour
and all that.
nonsense, It's like 1.5 hour in the morning, 1.5 hour in the evening, 1.5 hour gym, 1.5 hour aerobic. And to get 1,000 TSS that way, I don't even know how.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, everything has a limit. Whether it's mental, whether it's physical,
physiological.
to a large extent, it is a combination of everything. And at the end of that week, with a week left to travel, I came down with a little bit of a sore throat. And any other time in a year or in a training block, the last time I'd gotten sick was almost 2 years ago. That's when my Training Peaks said I was last sick. And a small sore throat when I did my session the next day in the gym, and came back from the gym, and I'm like, oh, this is more than a sore throat.
Yeah.
I was hoping it wouldn't be. And then it was just all out just fever. So that took me out for about 3 days. And usually with 3 days, I'm fully recovered. But by the third day, I was still having a lot of rhinitis and a lot of that strep throat still in my system. And at this point, I was like, oh man, let's just cancel this whole thing. At this point, I'd booked tickets to Jaipur. I'd booked tickets for my support for Anish.
Yeah.
I'd booked rooms. I'd invested in my equipment. All in all, about 3.5-4 lakhs worth of an investment to this one day.
Yeah.
And I'm just like at my lowest, and I was like, the easy thing to do right now would be to just skip it, right? And so then I talked to another friend of mine, and we were just like, let's just take it day by day, and let's not cancel anything. Let's just find out if you're COVID positive and negative. So first thing I did was I took a COVID test, came back negative within about 3 hours. I found out, so that at least mentally gave me the peace that I can board the plane and exit the plane and do that stuff.
Yeah.
And then it was just just go out, get as much of the work as I can do. And so it took me a week to recover, and then end of that week I started doing my efforts. So first session I did was a gym session. Then I did 50% of the work for the next session. Then I did 75% of the work for the next session. Then it was travel, and then I was in Jaipur at that point. And yeah, so that was, I'm glad I didn't cancel it, because in hindsight, it was the worst shape I've ever been in lining up at a nationals. But I ended up 7th on the day on the official result sheet. Actually, I was 13th fastest guy on the day, because every state and every team is allowed 2 starters.
Okay.
But so the top 2 guys on every team started, and on the official national start list, I was 7th.
Okay.
But they also allowed guys who didn't qualify on the state teams and the services and railways teams, and also a couple guys from the Sai Sports Academy to do an effort on the day. And when you place those guys also in on the unofficial results sheet, I was 13th.
Okay.
So the fastest time was 4:55. A kid named Vishwajit Singh, who was the winner of the under 23 TT at Road Nats. Strong kid, 20 years old. Second was Anil Mangla, who was the champion of the individual pursuit last year. And third was Dinesh, who was second last year. And so, yeah, the results, the top guys were still the top guys. But I moved down the result sheet.
Right.
And in the week leading up to it, as I was doing my sessions in Jaipur, I mean, the same efforts I was doing when I was healthy, I was doing them basically uh, 15 to 20% less in power. So I was,
Right.
1 minute efforts I was doing at 600.
Mm.
Now I was doing them at 500. 2 minute efforts I was doing at like 450. Now I was
Yeah.
doing at 350.
Yeah.
And I was like, I knew heading into that, but the numbers were moving up by like 5 watts.
Yeah.
But I knew the rate at which it was
Improvement is
moving
not
up
enough.
was not enough. And in a 5 minute all out effort on the track, there's no hiding. There's no place to like lift up your pace or adjust your pace. It's like the adjustment in your pace is a quarter of a second. That's the adjustment you can make on the track.
Right.
If you blow up, the difference is a second. So it's so clinical. It's like surgery. You really have to be on it.
Right.
And so yeah, I mean, the way I justify it is, I'm glad I went, but I could have quit. Because now it's kind of life is all about. I mean, people have this idea that life is about being happy and being at this high level of just being,
Yeah.
being successful the entire time. But life is about being able to surf the highs and lows, right?
Right.
And so I'm glad that the low was this and not like some crash or something else, like a
Yeah.
COVID negative or something like that. Or me losing my motivation or something like that, or losing focus of the goal. And so now I know, okay, naturally this is the low. And so now it's just a matter of kind of surfing it and, starting the new year and just building things up slowly.
Correct.
And
Yeah, we tend to, when things, and especially for people who are looking from outside,
Yeah.
right? NJ is this, god of Indian cycling. He's doing everything right.
Yeah.
He's, going through. He can't do.
At 35, he's still getting faster.
Yeah, at 35, he's still getting faster. He can't put a foot wrong,
Yeah.
and all this. But at the end of the day, you have to, wake up
Yep.
and do the work
You have to do
that
the
is
work,
needed,
yeah.
and the work that is that probably no one else is doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you have the same feelings, same emotions,
Absolutely. And
same
also
pain.
the difference I think is because I've seen this. I work with a lot of athletes.
Right.
30 athletes every year. I've worked with over 200 athletes over the last 5 years. And the ones who are able to, it's the ones who are able to, just walk past the highs and not get too caught up in it and get addicted to that. And the ones who are able to walk with the same aplomb past the lows and come away with takeaways and realize that this is just part of the journey, right?
Right.
Those are the ones who ultimately end up kind of lasting longer in the sport. And the ones who kind of fizzle out or, sell their bike after, something happens or something they expected to happen didn't happen. That's the difference.
Yeah.
For me, it's like, I've been through enough of this. I've been through highs and lows enough to know that the highs and lows are what the definition of life is.
Yeah.
It's not high.
Yeah, exactly. And that the word that you used is also quite interesting, right? Not being addicted to those highs.
Yeah.
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah. It's very, very important.
Yeah.
Excellent. Now, just going a little into the falling sick part, right?
Yeah.
So, do you think the work rate was too high or something like that?
It's just a combination of everything. I'd never been in that headspace. I mean, I'm the guy who kind of looks at my training plan. I'm like, I look like a month down. I'm like, okay, that session, I have to make sure I'm successful at that session. So, do I have my spare wheel ready a month ahead of time? Do I have a spare cassette? Do I have a spare chain sitting there?
Right.
Do I have like my headset poles spares? Do I have a spare derailleur hanger? I look at all of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so this is the first time where I didn't have the courage to look at the next day's workout, because that was the approach that is required when you're faced by a seemingly insurmountable task. you just have to just go head on into it.
Yeah.
You trust the plan. Here, I absolutely trust the coach because here's the guy who broke 4 minutes. No human has done that. I don't think any other will. People underestimate how hard it is.
Man.
And I think even Ghana might have a little trouble doing it, but I'm just saying. But for the first time, a plan actually intimidated me. And I'm glad. That's why I wanted to work with a guy like Ashton.
Right.
Because I saw he was doing things differently. Not even the Australian national program or the American national team is training the way that this guy did. Because he didn't have a coach doing this. He was self-coached. And he took a little bit of input from the best in the world. He's worked with the best coaches in the world. And he just has, that's the other difference, the mentality difference that a guy like him has. He has this immense sense of self-belief, which I'm not even going to try and dissect because I feel like he was born with it to some extent. And he's not the kind of guy who like dissects it. And so it's very hard for me to learn from it. So all I can say is, in fact, I told him, hey, Ashen, the approach I'm going in with this is I'm just going to try and do what you did, which is just do the work and execute on the day. I felt like I felt like a retard saying it to like this guy, but I was like, I genuinely, that's the approach I want to take because no other thing that I've done in the past would have prepared me for this. So to answer your question, did I stretch myself a bit too much? Yes. It was a conscious choice. I trusted the process and I wouldn't say I reached a limit, but my current methods and my current approach to it and also my self-belief didn't match the work rate and the self-belief. Just sometimes you do need to believe that you're going to recover for the next session, and for the first time I went out and I was like, usually when I go out on rides, when I'm doing my threshold efforts and stuff, so I'm just like, I go out, threshold is a range. It's like, for me, it's like when I'm in shape, it's like 330 to 360 watts, right? And if I get it anywhere in there, it's a good day, right? For these workouts, I was like, okay, today's target is anaerobic. And literally the 30 minutes that I was riding out to the place, all I was thinking was, can I do 450 watts for 2 minutes? Can I do 450 watts? And you're never gonna get that session checked off if that's the way you think.
Right.
But I went out there and somehow I was able to switch off my mind and just get the session done. Focused on cadence, focused on sitting down because in the track you have to sit down. So focused on those execution cues and, kept the recoveries tight because a huge part of this training was the ratio of the work to rest was super important because you're working on a thing called functional reserve capacity, FRC. And you can intensively train it or extensively train it. So intensive training implies increasing the power that you can put for a certain duration. Extensive training is at a certain power, can you extend the amount of time for which you can hold it?
Right.
So when the work to rest ratio is 2:1, you're focusing on intensive work. You're focusing on holding a higher power and you have twice the amount of rest. So you're able to do that. And then for the extensive work, you're holding the work to rest ratios equal. So you're trying to increase the amount of time for which you can hold a certain power for a duration, right? So I knew what was going on, what I was demanding of my body or the stimulus that I was trying to apply to my body. But it was that self-belief thing, it was like the workouts became, I built up the workouts to something bigger than they were. And that happens when you try something for the first time. You have to develop the skill set to be able to go to battle with those workouts. And in some sense, it's got to get to a place where you're not going to battle. You're just working with the workouts. You're like buddies who are trying to get to the same end goal. Right. And so I needed to put myself through that because unless you introduce yourself to that new stimulus, you're not going to be able to develop the skill set to tackle it. Right. And so for 2022, my goal is we're going to try, I'm talking to Ashton today evening. And I think the big thing we're going to probably try and do next year is the first time we tried this approach was in the lead into track nats, right after coming off road nats, completely on the limit, and then trying to run on fumes. Essentially, this is the fourth peak of the year I was attempting. Right. And physiologically, no human attempts 4 peaks in a year. 3 is the max. 2 is what's healthy. And so next year, I think what we're going to do is a low pressure kind of build this way. So I'll probably put myself in a situation where performance on a race day is not this pressure that's there. And I think if I'm able to go through that, an entire 8 weeks of that, then reapplying it will just be, it's like the recipe now.
Right.
You have the script, you just have to read off it. Right? This track nationals was me getting the script for the first time.
Right.
It's like, oh shit, this is the script. How am I gonna, what language is this in? So
No, but it's also heartening for me to listen to you about that fear of the workout and that mentality and all that. It just reconfirms the that what every one of us go through that, right?
Yeah, and a huge part of training and success in training is about accepting that there will be challenging sessions.
Right.
What you have to develop as an athlete is not this motivation that can be conjured up on a snap. But what you have to develop is a set of tools in your head to how are you going to tackle these challenges. And the thing is, there is a recipe for that. There is a snap, there is a trigger word that you can say. For me, it's usually just breathe. It's cadence. It's let's have fun with it. And that kind of those three kind of triggers just enables me to tackle the most challenging of sessions, and even sessions off the bike, life stuff.
Right. Excellent. So it's very interesting. Thank you for sharing that. So coming to after the track nationals, now you are in off season.
Yes.
Right. And we also
season, also known as
known as biryani season. So what how do you deal with off season? What is your what does your off season look like?
So for me, it's I've learned from past off seasons, there's always this temptation to hold on to that high level of fitness. It's nice to see you and your CTA is at 110, 120. Like, oh man, I held it at 110 for nearly 4, 5, 6 weeks from road to track until I got sick. And so the first thing that I learned was be okay with losing your fitness, and the best way to do that is don't look at your training peaks. I do open my training peaks every day just to record my sleep hours and my weight, just because that's now my new habit. And it's not necessarily that everyone does that. I'm in just that space where I'm comfortable looking at those numbers and not freaking out.
Right.
Some people look at their weight and they're like, oh shit, it's going up, and freaking out, right? For me, it's like, yeah, it is going to go up and it'll come back down. Objectively speaking, I have to lose like 30 points on my CTL. So, 110 to about 80, ideally, right? Maybe 75, 70. Besides that, in a more subjective sense, it's eat the stuff I couldn't eat all year, like beef fry and parota, small stuff like that. And getting it out of the system instead of thinking about it and, making it this bigger thing than it is. After you eat like 2 parotas and like a little bit of beef fry, you're like, oh, that's it.
That's it.
And you eat that one biryani, you're like, oh, Bero's biryani, and you're like, oh, that's it. So getting that out of the system, and the other thing is just not touching the bike or looking at power numbers or worrying about having to do any structured stuff. So I'll probably do a couple rides with a couple of my athletes, couple of friends, just easy pedals. That's an important part. And moving once a day, that's a goal that I keep for myself. So like yesterday was the one day I didn't do anything and it was beautiful. But today, right now, I'm just thinking, man, I really want to go for a run. So after this, I'm just going to put on some shoes and go for a run. And again, like not digging deep and not going into the red, just enjoying it, a little bit of this and that, but nothing in particular. And then just doing stuff that I'm not able to do throughout the year, like spend some time with my mom, catch up with people I don't normally get to catch up with, and setting up logistically for next year. Onboarding a whole bunch of new athletes, passport renewal, I'm doing that tomorrow. So these small things that are just like keeps the day full, so you're not like bored out of your mind. So keeping engaged with just like menial daily chores, really.
How long does this season last?
So Off season will be about 2 weeks, because 2 weeks will be that time which the CTO will get down to 70.
Yeah.
And yeah, so probably first, second week of Jan, I'll get back into that structured kind of training mindset. And then I'll start working with my coach again on February 1st. So I'm going to give myself a month to just do what I want.
Yeah.
And then say, hey, then submit to my coach's, my coach's regime that is based on what my goals for the year are.
Right.
So, yeah.
So you mentioned this year you worked towards 4 peaks.
Yeah.
So how do you plan your plan a season for yourself?
Yeah. So I mean, you kind of define the peaks that you want to kind of get to, right? And a little bit comes from experience, because I know. If I'm at my basal fitness level, right? And if I define what that basal fitness level is. So for me, it's like around 80 to 90 CTL, somewhere in between there. That's my basal fitness level. I know with 4 weeks, I can get, if I'm at around 90, I can get to nationals winning form in about 4 weeks, because I've refined it so much. I've done 8 weeks, I've done 16 weeks, I've done 12 weeks. And I know that 4 weeks gets me super sharp and ready to race at a top level. For the track, I'm still figuring out what that number is. I've only done 2 track nationals. I've only been a track rider for 6 months, right?
Yeah.
And these are against guys who have been track racing for 5-6 years.
Yeah.
So I remember where I am in that context.
Most of them start
on track, and they never move out of track also.
Most of them start as kids on the track.
Yeah, they do. Yeah. 14-year-olds, 16-year-olds. So I know where I am in my journey. So I'm not like, a lot of the talk on the track was, road guys that just don't have track speed, or this guy's too old to go fast.
It'll come.
I'm like, that's perfect. I like what I'm hearing, because they're moving me off their radar, which is good. It's a position of advantage to be considered the underdog.
Yeah.
But as far as the 4 peaks, you define your peak, define what your basal level is, I think it's important to not complete, if you're serious about getting to your physical potential, then you have to define what the basement level is, don't go underground, right?
Yeah.
And that's about just being honest with yourself, right? And so for me, it's like, I know if I go down to 70, it's going to be a struggle. For me to go down to 70, I have to like not ride for 2 weeks, which it doesn't happen, know. So
not if it is not the off season.
Correct. Exactly. That's the only time I don't ride my bike. I mean, so it's all about defining what your normal is. And for some people, their basement might be riding 2 days or just the weekend, right?
Yeah.
For me, it's like, I cannot not ride every day of the week, because then I don't feel good, just like health wise and mentally and physically. So yeah, I guess it's once you kind of move your fitness level up, you require a certain level of stimulus to kind of feel and operate optimally. Right?
Correct. Yeah.
And I can ride 7 days in the week and perform just at my top level mentally, at any task. Whereas some people, if they ride 7 days a week, they'd be in bed, and getting it from their wife, right?
Yeah.
So, define your peak. It's kind of set that performance envelope. It's like, this is the top and this is the bottom, and then you just have to kind of training is about managing things in that performance envelope, right? Basement, peak, and so I know for the road, it's 4 weeks for me to get from kind of not from basement, but from kind of that average to the top,
right?
And so for the track, it probably is, to be honest, it's probably about that same time, 4 weeks, and I'll eventually figure it out.
So you have those events, you will know the event dates and then time those accordingly.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and
until then, because a lot of those dates come quite late.
Exactly.
So you got to be able to
so that's the thing,
maintain.
Right? I mean, usually these dates about 4 weeks before minimum, up to 8 weeks. So if you set your performance envelope, like this is the basement, this is the average, this is the peak, as long as you stay close to that middle, you're fine. With 4 weeks notice, you can get to that top, right? And so, yeah, that's the way I look at it. And next year, yeah, it's about, I know what my performance envelope is. I know what it takes to perform on the road at the top level. I know what I don't quite know exactly in terms of numbers what it takes to perform at the top level on the track is, but I have to determine that.
Right.
And yeah, it's just a matter of that. I think, yeah, defining the top and the bottom, staying in the middle as much as you can, and then making the push when the time is right.
Right. Excellent. That is fantastic. So I think we covered everything that I wanted to talk about.
Awesome.
Now,
Yeah.
until the next edition of
Yes, the fifth appearance.
Fifth appearance. Thank you again for taking the time.
Yeah, good to talk.
Awesome.
Until the next one.
Until the next one. That was my conversation with Naveen John. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. If you are enjoying these podcasts, please make sure you subscribe to the channel on YouTube as well. The channel is Bikey Venky, Pikeyvenky. And also subscribe on the podcasting app of your choice, be it Spotify, Amazon Music, or Google Podcasts or Apple Podcasts. As always, thank you for your support. See you next week with another guest.